I think the easiest way to start is to tell you that I've only been here for less than 24 hours, but I know already that Omaha does not play. Omaha, from the welcome to the lightning storms last night, to the brass band for Antonio, that was awesome. You guys do it better than anybody else. My name is Ryan Freitas. It's very nice to be here. It's wonderful to be here. My co-founder, Tony, was here last year, and he raved about you guys. So excited to be here, very excited to get started. Let's do it. So you can get at me anytime at Ryan Chris with Twitter questions or anything else like that, but I'm really excited if you have questions during the talk or after the talk, go ahead and ask. Really, I can't see you, so we'll have to wait until afterwards, but you let me know if there's anything about what I've said today or anything related to what I do. Happy to answer questions. You can also find me at about.me/RyanChris. There you can find a little bit more about my background. I've got a couple of different things in my background that you might not expect, which is something that Antonio has been talking about as well. So today, ownership. This is something that I've been thinking a lot about, but there's a story of how I got there. So I am the co-founder and chief designer, interaction designer for About.me. Can I ask if any of you have a page? Fantastic. About.me is a starting point for your identity online. We like to try to aggregate together all the different pieces of you that you're distributed across the web. That presentation piece is the doorway towards discovery and ability to interact with others. We like to think about it as authentic identity, rather than being the sum of the last tweets that you made, or the last blog post you did, or doing something that's connected to your social graph. We try to aggregate all those pieces together, give you total control, curatorial powers, and then find other people that you might have the same interests with. This is something that we are all very passionate about on my team. We have a kind of delicate obsession with the idea that other services don't really do it as well as could be, and they want to tie you to things that you might not really think about as truly yours. So we've been obsessed with that idea for a while, and that'll get into some of the reasons why ownership is important, and we'll tie all these things together. So when Jeff originally approached me about speaking, I had a brief moment of panic, and there's a reason for that. I have spent the last few years very much focused on my company, building up my team, getting the right people involved, making sure the product evolves. The issue with that is that I had spent the years prior as a design consultant, wherein my business was actually getting up on stage as frequently as I could to talk about the things that I was doing. And suddenly I wasn't doing that anymore. And actually it's okay. I was really happy focusing. But when I was thinking about speaking here at Big Omaha, I was like, what will I talk about? What possibly could I have to share of that? Because I haven't been talking about this at all. What do I believe in right now? What's really important? So I treated it like any other crisis that I would have in the design or product realm, and I just turned it into a research project. So I did a design visualization on my, the last 7,500 tweets that I did. As you can see, this was no help at all. I don't talk about anything important when it comes to product design, or even particularly helpful advice when it comes to running a startup. I'm kind of useless online, or at least from Twitter's perspective. I have my followers, and I'm glad for their patience with the fact that I talk mostly about SEC football and the SF Giants, and occasionally my son. But really what it comes down to is that what I've been talking about publicly is not the things I've been thinking about, and really in the last year, been kind of tinkering away at, because they're very important with the way I see other teams building successfully. I don't just run my own team, I advise others, and I've invested in a few, and try to help them take on a perspective where they feel a true sense of ownership for what they're doing. Now, the reason I'm not out there publicly saying anything about this actually has a backstory. So about 4 years ago, I wrote this post on Tumblr, and I have a private Tumblr account, not private, but it's ryanfreitas.tumblr.com. I don't post there very often, but I decided on my 35th birthday that I was going to basically talk about 35 things that I thought that I had learned up to that point. I'm going to turn 39 this August, and it seems silly that I tried to distill 35 things at that time. So I talked about life and love and business and what I had learned, and posted it, got some Tumblr loves or hearts, and really just forgot about it. What I didn't know at the time is that there was a fashion for little bon mots from entrepreneurs and founders. And it turned out that one little thing I said, which was this: if you're interested in the living heart of what you do, focus on building things rather than talking about them. That would explain the 3 years during which I didn't really say much of anything publicly, even tweets. So it was fine. Somebody turned this into a little meme, and getting memed is kind of like getting maced, except the burning sensation lasts a little bit longer. This little piece I didn't really expect it, but what happened next was a little weird. Post fades into oblivion, but every day I get a couple of these. People tweeting at me over and over again, a little reminder, don't be that guy that talks about what you do, keep doing it. Which is great. Hey, daily reminder, you need to know that you should be focused on the work that you do. But a little bit of paralysis, because I'm not sure if I'm able to be out there saying, hey, look, this is what we've learned. And these are the things that you should be doing maybe as well. Anytime you're in paralysis, though, I think the best cure for that is absurdity, which is great when Ivanka Trump retweets something you say to 1.6 million people. So I actually have to thank the Trump family for really just kind of breaking me out of the mode where I didn't feel like I could say anything, because honestly, there's always a moment where we have to speak out, when we have to tell everybody exactly what we believe in. And mostly I believe in The Clash. So when I was 7 years old, I heard Rock the Casbah for the first time. And I don't think there's been any band whose music has been the soundtrack to my life as much as The Clash since then. There's been absolutely no way for me to avoid tying major events in my life to their music. Now, something you might not know about The Clash is that the way they made their music is almost as important as the music that they produced. They signed the first big contract with CBS Records, the first big contract of any punk band out of the UK scene. It was for $100,000. At that time, the money was ridiculous. They got accused of selling out. They got accused of being poster boys for corporate rock. When they were these guys were leftists. They were absolute committed leftists, anti-fascists. And if you listen to their music, you know exactly where they stand. But the ethos behind their music and the way they made their music translated over to the contracts that they cut with CBS over the years. They did things like making certain that every single one of their double and triple albums was sold at the exact same price, about £5 in the UK, for what you would get for a single album, which is kind of different. They made sure that all their shows stayed the same price so that they could get anybody into them. All of that resulted in a very approachable set of principles that they based all of their work on. They wanted to work the way they worked because they didn't think anyone else was going to do it. They got the financial backing to be able to survive, and they persisted forward. Now, the quote above, "Are you taking orders, or are you taking over?" is from their first single, 1977, White Riot. This song was fundamental to me when I was growing up because I believed that that was the question you needed to constantly be asking yourself. It was the ethos that I wanted to take into my own work. I wanted to own it, and if I didn't own it, I had to ask whether or not I was pushing things forward enough. The idea of ownership for me, it starts with this belief that you have to be pushing boundaries and you have to be taking care of what you believe in. You have to be able to take care of the thing that you're building, the idea behind it. You have to be able to take care of the people you're trying to provide it for, and you have to be able to take care of the people that you're building it with. So it's funny that Antonio started with this idea of, what's the biggest thing ever? What are what's the best thing that's ever happened to you in your life? I think there's a bit of an odd byproduct of the current situation in the way we build companies and startups specifically that focuses on milestones, focuses on big, earth-shattering press coverage events. I've had two in the last 3 years. One was selling my company to AOL, and the second one, about a year and a few months ago, was buying it back. We get a lot of questions about, can you buy it back? Yes, it happened to us, or kind of more importantly, we happened to it. The real thing about these events, though, is that they're important not so much that they're celebrated the way they are, but what you learn in between and afterwards. My belief is that a lot of these things are important only in the sense that they demarcate points in our life where things changed, and we get a moment to reflect about the stuff that happened. So today I'm going to tell you a story. It's mostly about ownership. It's about what I learned having something, giving up control, and then busting my ass to get it back. Alongside my team, because there's absolutely no way this happens solo, or even just two co-founders. Today we're not talking about equity when we talk about ownership. We're talking about responsibility. We're talking about the faith that we have in one another to serve an idea and to bring it to an audience. I believe that the story of About.me represents a good example of this, only in the sense that it has a happy ending because every single member of the team had a sense of ownership for not only what they were building, but for the audience that they were building it for and for one another. So let's set the scene. 2009 to 2010, San Francisco. The Facebook IPO has not happened yet. Instagram has not happened yet, though Kevin Systrom was in the floor above me working on what would become Instagram at the time, down at Pier 38 in San Francisco. San Francisco is the news a lot right now because people are flooding to it, but I think it's one of those things where what you're experiencing here in Omaha is very similar to the way things were in 2009, 2010 in San Francisco, where people are gelling together, finding opportunities, making introductions, trying to tie it all together because there's a lot of potential. I see that here in the same way that I saw it in San Francisco 4 years ago. There's a lot going on in the city at this time, but we're not really sure exactly what it means. We know we're building something that's important because we believe in it. We have an obsession about it, but we also know that it doesn't work unless it gets to scale. When people talk about why you would ever sell something, there's a kind of a baseline question that you need to answer. And I got this one from Heaton Shah, who is the CEO and founder of Kissmetrics. This is a question that he asked, or he asked me back when I said, what would be the inspiration for you to ever sell anything that you built? And it's pretty straightforward. Can you grow faster with someone who acquires you, than you can on your own? And we looked at what we were building and how we could build it. And when AOL came to us saying, hey, look, we can integrate you with the rest of the products in the company across a suite with 30 million users here and 20 million users here, the opportunity that we saw was About.me gaining access to market and growth more so than we could ever do it on our own. Now, in terms of context, I wasn't getting a whole lot of sleep at the time. My wife was pregnant. This is me doing something that you're not supposed to do as a new father, which is fall asleep while you were watching the baby. My wife took this to shame me a little bit later, but it's so cute, I like to use it. We were trying to do everything we could. My wife was pregnant at the time. We were considering the acquisition offer. I was doing my best to keep up. And when I talk about all this stuff, it's not like I had a good analysis of what was going on at the time. A lot of the belief that I take out of this, it comes from an understanding that I gained only after I had an opportunity to really reflect back. And that wouldn't happen until much later. One thing that I did learn about post-acquisition is that it's not everything that people think it's going to be. There's this idea of future joy, that you'll eventually get to the point where you're utterly happy. Future joy, as many people have pointed out, is a myth. You get to these places in your life, to these milestones, and there's yet a new set of situations or environments or contexts that you have to overcome, or at least put up with. I should make it clear, our time at AOL was fantastic. We had absolute support from Tim Armstrong and Brad Garlinghouse, the CEO and the EVP of product that we were under. The real question was whether or not we actually fit there. There was a lot of managing around of everything else that we were doing, but most importantly, the challenge was we now were managing someone else's property. This is where the idea of stewardship comes in. Stewardship is a concept that, hey, look, you don't own this thing, but you're going to take care of it and make sure it grows and is healthy and the audience is healthy. Suddenly we have been disconnected or disaggregated from the thing that we had kind of really had before, which was our ownership of the product, of the audience, not of one another. We kept that resilient. But our resiliency was daunted by the unfortunate circumstances or the disappointments that cropped up the longer that we stayed at AOL. Now, those disappointments were in fact a symptom of a shift in organizational priorities on the part of AOL. We simply weren't a fit anymore. So the time and the place came where we had an opportunity to leave. Now, a lot of the questions that come up around us buying ourselves back is how? How does one buy yourself out of a large organization after you've already sold it? The core principles of that is patience, transparency, and working like hell. Being gracious once you're out also helps, if only because there's a long-term relationship in all of these things that happen, specifically in business, specifically in mergers and acquisitions, where you want to maintain really close relationships with the people that you're involved with. There's no way to get out of this having burnt bridges, and so we had to take an opportunity to really get it done. Now, the idea of being independent again was interesting, if only because there was a huge context change. We had been acquired 4 days after our public launch. We had worked for 2 years. We had grown the audience somewhat, but suddenly we were basically taking out a full-form product into the open on our own. And we had to deal with quite a few really interesting topics in the first few weeks. which led to my co-founder and I looking at one another in the eye and saying, what the hell did we just do? We just took on responsibility again for things that we had sold off. We actually had taken on in a brand new context where we weren't entirely certain what the landscape looked like. We had been so focused for quite a bit of time on making certain that we could keep the team together. We had 100% retention, making sure that we had the right product and the right fit and the right investors, and getting it successfully out, that we hadn't really paid attention all that much to what we were actually doing, which was re-engaging with the responsibilities that we had had from the beginning, to the audience, to the idea, to one another. Our success, if it were to be measured, if it were to happen, would have brand new metrics. We wouldn't know exactly where we were going until we got there. There was a complete moment of fear, once again, panic, but we pursued it with the best ideas we had possible. The year itself has been amazing since we got out. We had our anniversary of buying it back in February. Our metrics are good. Team is healthy. Product is healthy. We're branching out. We're doing new things. We're very excited about it. But the evolution from being internal to external, to losing responsibility, to gaining it back, has been something that has really forced me to kind of reflect a little bit over the last year and kind of understand what exactly we had done. Part of my background that you might find out on an About Me page or somewhere else where I've talked about it is that I've spent some years as a professional line cook. This is my first executive chef, Michael Mina. He ran a place called Aqua in San Francisco. I left technology in 2001. I didn't so much leave it as it left me. In 2001 in San Francisco, you could not get a tech job unless you had already had one and your company for somehow made it through the dot bomb successfully. I wanted to stay in San Francisco. I'd cooked my way through college, and I wanted to do it at a higher level. So while a lot of my friends were packing up and moving back home, I decided to stay in SF and cook for as long as I had to in order to successfully re-enter technology when it came back. I wouldn't re-enter tech for another 4.5 years. I worked my way up from garde manger to a sauté cook at the same restaurant. I then eventually switched over to a pastry line position. I'm still pretty happy with the work that I did there, busting my ass for 4 years, but along the way I learned some really important lessons, and one of them was from Michael. Was this idea that everything changes when your name is on the door. Michael's own experience was that he had come in to save a restaurant that I worked at after the original exec, the one who opened it, had left. And his experience taught him significantly a lot about what it means to build for somebody else when you're not getting as much of the credit. He would go on, get some investors together, put his name on the door, and open a series of restaurants in New York, San Francisco, Las Vegas, Los Angeles. He's a pretty successful dude. But the lesson he taught me was that there is a tremendous amount of both positive and negative impact from having your name on the door. When something goes wrong, it's your fault. If something goes right, you'll get credit and everyone else will be excluded. Now, this is despite the fact that he's got 6 restaurants to look after, and he can't be at every single one. So his sous, his chefs de cuisines are taking care of business day to day. That public input of, hey, you're responsible, is something that he has to, it's a burden he has to live with. It's also something that teams have to understand. There has to be an understanding that somebody at the forefront, the founder or an owner, the person whose name is on the door, is the one taking all the credit and sometimes all the blame, and that they have to figure out a way to successfully share credit internally and communicate, more importantly, about what's going on in order to be successful together. One of the things about ownership that I learned was that you can go into it very wide-eyed thinking that, hey, I can do anything I want. I can hire my friends. I can market in totally insane ways. I can build the product that I absolutely want to work with. And I can do a workflow, like I can have a distributed team. We have a distributed team. It causes problems after a while, but you have to figure out a way to work. In reality, the actual risk that you can take is a hell of a lot smaller. There's not as much opportunity to do all the things you want, if only because you're responsible. You have to be doing these things, and ultimately, your name is on the door. I think there's no greater trap in being an owner than paternalism. The belief that you know better than your team and your audience what you need to be building and how you should be building it. I think there's an immediate response that once you own something again, which I learned is the desire to embrace it and make it yours and no one else's. And while that's good up to a point, when you're not taking anyone else's input, you are not building to the best expression of the idea, and you're not keeping faith and commitment in the team that you put together. Finally, once again, I really cannot overemphasize the idea that ownership is not something that comes from founders, it's not something that comes from CEOs, it's something that comes from the entire team. Everyone has to have a feeling of ownership in what they're doing. They have to have responsibility to the audience, they have to have responsibility to the idea, and they have to have a responsibility to one another. I don't know of a single surefire way to succeed, but I do know that the fastest way to failure is making certain that there's a difference between how people feel about that responsibility on the team. Everyone has to feel it deeply. It's the only way to move forward. Ultimately, I think the thing that defines why we take on all these crazy risks, why we force ourselves to kind of do it, is a delicate kind of obsession. It's crazy to do, to own. It's crazy to push for an idea. But I think there's always people who have something burning inside them that forces them to recognize that they will do it better than anyone else, and if they don't do it, someone else is going to get it wrong. This is James Freeman. He is the founder of Blue Bottle Coffee. I know you guys don't have Blue Bottle out here. Has anyone ever heard of Blue Bottle Coffee? All right, cool. All right. As a little bit of an incentive, the first 2 people to ask a question today will get a bag of Blue Bottle beans that have been roasted within the last 48 hours. I brought them from San Francisco because that's the way James does it. He is obsessed with the idea of making certain that the coffee that he serves is no more than 48 hours from the roastery, which means a roastery has to be local, which is why the 6 or 7 stores that are in the Bay Area all are served by the Oakland Roastery, and the ones in Brooklyn are all from the Brooklyn Roastery, and the ones in LA will eventually be from the LA Roastery. James just did an interview with an article with Business Week that paints him as a bit of a weirdo. He's an amazingly focused guy. He doesn't believe in doing anything that he doesn't need to do. He doesn't believe in making it so that you can have a third place a la Starbucks and plug in your laptop and have Wi-Fi. He wants you to focus on the coffee. And the reason he owns and the reason why he's doing what he does is because he believes everyone else is going to do it differently and therefore not right. Now, this idea is something that he shares in common with my friend and mentor, Jeff Veen from TypeGit. I saw that TypeGit was a sponsor. They're great guys. Jeff and I have known one another for a long time. And when I said I was coming to Big Omaha to talk about ownership, he said, of course, yes. The fundamental principle of ownership is the debt we owe our ideas. And it blew my mind. And he explained to me that in his own case, when he was dealing with typography on the web, he was dealing with a 560-year-old tradition of type since the Gutenberg Bible. And he owed it to every typographer, to every foundry, to every font designer out there to make certain he got the solution right. Everything out there that was up there till that time wasn't, because it wasn't giving the rights and the money, at least in some way, back to the people who actually produced type. So Jeff and his co-founders pursued the idea of TypeGit primarily because they absolutely believed that the idea was so important and so vital that they had to do it themselves because everyone else was going to mess it up. And so we find ourselves full circle. The Clash, once again, with their example, do it yourself. And I don't want you to just do it for yourself. I'm here today to tell you to do it for yourself. Not fortune, not fame, just because you are the only person who is going to do it the right way. If you believe that, and you can convince others, and you can take responsibility for your idea, you can take responsibility for your audience, and responsibility for your team, you're going to do great. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions. Anybody who's got one, and you can also fire them off at Ryan, Chris, and I'll answer independently. Thank you very much. Thank you.
If you have a question for Ryan, you probably can't see me out here in the aisle. If you have a question for Ryan, please come up and stand behind one of these microphones in the aisles. And as you all know, with standard Big Omaha tradition, I ask the first question. Ryan, I'm curious, going back to the ownership issue, and you said everyone should take ownership. What have you found some owners or founders who struggle to let go of that? And how can you release some of that and empower others to do that? A lot of people hold it really tight.
People who hold tight have a tendency to have the same things in common. They find themselves in situations where they're threatened, where either they went into, if it's post-acquisition where they went into a political situation where they weren't totally prepared, or maybe even they've never been in a large organization that had its own political currents, and they're holding tightly, and it's post-facto, so they have to be kind of, you have to pull their fingers off one at a time in order to kind of say, hey, relax. If it happens beforehand, where there's a fight either between co-founders or there's a fight between the direction the team wants to go and the founders, what it comes down to is communication. They all have to, you know, if the commitment to one another and the commitment to the idea isn't sufficient, you have to remind them that there's an audience out there that's expecting this to work and that they need to take that responsibility absolutely seriously. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. The goal in all of it is to make certain that they understand exactly where they are and what their responsibility is.
Great, thank you. Let's go right over here.
Awesome. First, shout out for TypeKit. Word. Second, how do you make the perilous leap?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
How do you make the perilous leap? You have a great idea, you want to start.
Right, the perilous leap. If I find any time that somebody won't, because I have founders every once in a while, or people who are thinking about founding something, or people who are thinking about joining a team, if the problem is something you cannot stop talking about, if the problem is something you lie awake at night tinkering over, if you get that James Freeman moment where you're like, this is the solution, there's a built-in competitor and they're doing it wrong, then that's it. That is the push that you absolutely need. Everybody has to face down risk. I was doing a company, I had been independent for 3 years, this is about .me, my son was about to be born, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was scared out of my mind. I was taking on significant risk to long-term income and all, but we could not give up the idea of identity, and we thought that everyone else who was doing it absolutely wrong. We wanted to empower users. If you find yourself focused on those things, and you find yourself not able to let go, it's time to seriously consider the leap.
Hello, is it on? You said never assume you know better than your team. Can you share some very specific things that you do to create that environment?
Absolutely. So my team, I think I drive my team crazy, and my team also drives me crazy sometimes, because we both believe that we have considered all the possibilities and the way something should be built. But we try, and I've failed, and so have they sometimes, to communicate with one another that, hey, look, we're going to have the conversation. We're even going to slow down a release in order to make certain that we consider the edge cases. And hey, don't tell us how to spend time on the problem, because honestly, this will make things better. It comes down to faith and trust in one another, and that generally is earned by results. If you are totally believing in your team, you understand that every once in a while you did not consider all the options, and you need to be focused on everything else that you could do.
Great, Ryan. Online, people are loving that you bookended your talk with The Clash, so that you're getting a lot of love there. Let's go to a question over here.
This was just inspired by something you said a minute ago about feeling that, you know, like competition is doing it wrong. Well, I kind of feel about what I'm working on that the competition is actually right. It's the customer who's wrong. But I can profit off the customer not having the courage to go to do the right thing.
Well, that's not the competition doing it wrong. That's the competition giving the customer what they are asking for, absolutely opposed to what they need. And you can always come up with a new approach to satisfying customer needs, so long as you can convince them that doing things a different way is the right way to approach it. So good luck, and I mean, it's a good way to frame a problem that, hey, look, customers are taking a different approach to the way this problem should be solved, and with a little bit of education and a whole lot of proven value, we might be able to get them there. Thanks.
Ryan, you talked about the risks you think you can take.
Yes.
And I want to understand why you put workflow on there, and what does that mean?
Workflow is the decision that, hey, look, we're going to just randomly choose this one tool to work this way, or hey, look, we're going to try. I mean, so the decision we made early on was, oh, absolutely, we're going to be a distributed team. We're going to have developers in Brooklyn, in Portland, Maine, in Seattle, in Anchorage. We're going to have a QA guy in Omaha or anywhere, Iowa City. We're going to make certain that we're not locked into just the Bay Area. Great, works. So we're at 19 people, we are still making that work on a daily basis. Every once in a while, people make decisions on workflow and team size and distribution that don't necessarily work. you could say, hey, look, this is a great product, and if it was something else, distributed team wouldn't work. If the product team all needed to be in the same room every day, banging their heads against one another in order to get the best possible solution, you can absorb those risks in certain situations. But as ever, it's your mileage may vary.
Ryan, we have a question coming from Twitter from Ryan Wade. How has becoming a father changed your perspective on ownership and risk?
Man, my little boy is going to be 3. When we were considering pulling the company out, I had to have a really, really long conversation with my wife about what we were doing. Total faith in the team, total faith in what we were working on, but it represented something that my own conservative minds, I don't consider myself a conservative person, but my son immediately inspires desire to make safe and make whole and don't change the environment, get a little bit of stability. It was resolved by a conversation with my own father, who pulled me aside and was like, I understand this is scary, but everything's going to be okay. There are times in your life where you have to take risk. There are times in your life where you absolutely have to own up and take responsibility for the things you've done and the natural outcomes that will happen later. So he convinced me, and I convinced myself, and I convinced my wife, and keep my fingers crossed it all works out.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Ryan.
Thank you, everyone.